Are you feeling called to start a plant medicine garden? Make plant medicines for you and your family and community? Are you looking for more self and community sustainability for uncertain times? Are you hearing the pull to work with our plant kin and tend to our futures through tending to the earth? Are you wanting to learn how to care for your own health and loved ones' wellness with natural and traditional ways? Join Dr. Jackie Wilkins from Xalish Earth Medicines for a spring and summer filled with plant medicine, returning to ancestral ways, connecting with the earth, supporting your health, and nourishing your nervous system. In the Grow Your Own Medicine Spring 2024 course, you will be guided through an entire growing season from spring to fall, from seed to harvest to making herbal medicines. This is suitable for urban environments, pots, as well as apartments with balcony space. So this course is self-paced to fit into your schedule and daily rhythms and offers support, nourishment, and ritual. In the Grow Your Own Medicine Spring 2024 course, Jackie will walk with you through practical and energetic land tending, that's aka gardening, of 8 herbal medicines, as well as sharing traditional plant medicine wisdom with each of these plants. Jackie weaves ancestral knowledge, clinical wisdom, energetics, ceremony, earth magic, and practical gardening skills. If you'd like to learn more about the Grow Your Own Medicine Spring 2024 course with Dr. Jackie Wilkins, simply click on the link at the top of today's podcast show notes. And just FYI, doors for registration close on April 7th, 2024, so that's coming up. So register now for the Grow Your Own Medicine Spring 2024 course with Dr. Jackie Wilkins from Xalish Earth Medicines. Hey everyone, this is Mason and you're listening to HerbRally. Today's episode is another edition of the Herbalist Hour, and this time I'm joined once again by the Seed SistAs. That's Fee and Kazz. This is actually their second time on the show. Always great to catch up with them and learn from them. They've got so much knowledge and wisdom to share. Plus, they're just incredible storytellers. Always love hanging out with the Seed SistAs. So in this conversation, we chat about their new book, The Poison Prescription, connecting to the witching herbs, flying ointments, Henbane, Datura, belladonna, and a ton more. And also, before we get into the show, a huge shout out and thank you to our incredible HerbRally Schoolhouse members. Thank you so much for all of your support. We really could not do this without you. If you'd like to learn more about the HerbRally Schoolhouse, it's our private member area where we offer tons of awesome herbalism classes. There's a private Facebook group, there's herbal community discounts, and a whole lot more. So check out the HerbRally Schoolhouse at herbrally.com/schoolhouse. And if you'd like to try your first 30 days for free, you could use coupon code podcast just to check out the inside of the member area. Then it's only $10 a month. We try to make it as affordable as possible. So big thanks to our HerbRally Schoolhouse members for the support once more. And now on to today's episode with Fee and Kazz, the Seed SistAs. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and the flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today I'm joined by the Seed SistAs. That's Kazla Goodweather and Fiona Heckles. And they're back for their second time on the show. I think you're one of the few guests that have come back for a second time. So really excited to catch up with you two. How you two doing?
Yeah, really lovely to be back. It's nice to reconnect. So thank you for inviting us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's great to be back. It's lovely to be back in this cozy zone with you, chatting plants.
Yeah, people really enjoyed that first episode that we did. And we talked a bit about your last book. I want to say it's the Sensory Herbal, or the Sensory Herbalism book. But y'all sent me a new book. I want to say it came out in 2022 called Poison Prescriptions, which is a pretty sexy title, I'm not going to lie. I was trained very, in my herbal school, very conservatively. We didn't really talk anything about these poison plants, so to speak, or I want to say you might even call them in the book power herbs or witchy herbs, if I'm getting that correct. But yeah, I'm excited to delve further after perusing this book quite a bit yesterday. I got to say, I'm really excited about this conversation. Got some fun questions for you. So can you tell us a little bit about the new book, Poison Prescriptions?
Yeah, we can. And here in the UK, the herbs that we've written about in this book are on a special register. They're called the Schedule 20s. And that register was set up in the 60s, in the late 60s. and they are native European plants, sometimes called the witching herbs, but the ones that we focused on are the Solanaceae family, so within the nightshade family. And we were very, very lucky because when we did our herbalism training, we were still being trained by an older generation of herbalists who were very familiar with these plants because they'd been part of their materia medica, because they'd all been practicing before the 1968 Medicine Act came in. But as that generation of herbalists retired, the herbal medicine training courses became much poorer, in our opinion, because people weren't teaching about these very, very important, potent medicines.
And we've given it the name poison prescriptions, which was a little bit tongue-in-cheek because they are known as the poisons. But as we all know, anything can be a poison. It's about dosage. And that's kind of the bit with it, is that, some of our most potentially powerful poisons are also some of the most potentially powerful medicines. So kind of marrying that idea of prescriptions and poisons together kind of, to us, really depicted these herbs in particular well. But it's been an incredible journey that we've been on, working with these plants, but also researching them and talking to fellow herbalists. And we really wanted to put something out there that could help to support the revival of these really important plants, but with as much knowledge and information out there. And we'd really seen that there'd been this almost pushing down of the information around them, and an increase in fear around working with them. And we just wanted to address that balance a little bit with this piece of work.
So the book's been out for at least a year now. How has the audience reception been thus far? Have you seen like an increase in the popularity of using these plants in the particular ways you talk about in the book?
Well, since the very first piece of work that we did about this family of plants was with a herbal medicine charity in the UK. It's called Heartwood, and they run a professional training now. And at the time, one of their directors invited us to come and put together a series of podcasts about the plants. And he was the one who really encouraged us, Nick Rowley, really encouraged us to write this book. But since we began the work with him, what we've noticed is that there is an increase of clinical herbalists who are bringing these herbs back into their practices. And we're not the only medical herbalists that have been doing this work. Chantal Cabrera, who's I think you've spoken to on Herbal as well, lectures about the Schedule 20s as well. And there's other herbalists who are talking about them, because I think as a community, we've recognised the importance of reviving this education and this information.
Hey everyone, it's Mason. Just a quick interruption from the show to let you know about our 13 herbal freebies. If you go to HerbRally.com, on the navigation bar at the top of the page, you'll see a button that says Freebies. Just click there and you'll sign up for our email newsletter. And in exchange, we're offering 13 herbal freebies. That's ebooks, webinars, videos, downloadable audio, and discounts to cool herbal companies. So if you'd like to check out these freebies, as well as sign up for our email newsletter, we update you about current events, new monographs, new videos, etc. Just go to HerbRally.com and click on the button at the top of the page that simply says Freebies. Okay, that's it from me. Now back to the show. Yeah, I guess we'll. Oh yeah, go for it, Fee. Sorry.
Yeah, there was an interesting flow of interest in these plants, and we'd been working with them ourselves in practice, but also personal connections with the plants for 25 odd years. And it was really interesting that at the time that the book came out, suddenly there was this sort of cross globe interest seemed to suddenly be exploding. We had to do some research for the publishers to tell them which other books on the subject were out there, which led us down the sort of having a good look at what was there. And there was lots of other books that were either from a historical perspective or a witchy perspective. And there wasn't many that bridged this gap between the medicine and the magic. But what there was several books at the same time that were creating that, were they answering the call of people becoming interested, or was there suddenly this uprising of people like myself and Kazz that suddenly felt more confident to put this knowledge out there? So it's been this really interesting kind of look at society and what society may or may not be ready for or may not be interested in.
Yeah, I was telling you pre-call that I was just listening to a podcast that you two were in. I want to say it was called the InnerVerse podcast. If I'm getting that correct, I'll leave a link in the podcast show notes. But just reading the comments, it really seemed like a lot of people. I don't think that podcast is necessarily specifically herbal related, but reading all the comments, everyone in there seems super interested in the book. Some people picked it up, but they just seemed super excited about the topic. So, Kazz, you mentioned a series of podcasts you two did. Is that available for free somewhere, or was that, do you have to, behind a paywall, or?
It's part of, we created it for Heartwood education, so it's not available. It's
Gotcha.
still, it's at the moment, I think it's still in creation, because
Oh,
what happened was with Heartwood, we created it pre-pandemic, but during the pandemic, as many of us know, online learning became very easy, and Heartwood had launched their online courses, so they got completely overwhelmed with running an online herbal medicine training. So I think there's things in the backlog that will happen.
Yeah, there's a bank of recordings, isn't there, waiting to be produced
wow.
to a course there. But
we have produced our own course that goes alongside Poison Prescriptions. We've been producing it for the last year, and we'll be letting that out to the world in the next few months.
That's awesome. I didn't realize that. So, dear listener, go sign up for the Seed SistAs newsletter. We'll leave links to that in the podcast show notes as per usual. Sweet. I had no idea there was going to be a course kind of based around the book. That's a great idea, though.
yeah, people want to see moving images and feel into it a bit more as well, especially when you're working with these there's so many, even nettle can be mistaken so easily for dead nettle. Or a course we were running the other day, we sent folk out to dig up dandelion roots, and a lot of them came back with hawksbit. It's so easy to misidentify plants unless you're really familiar with them. So, that's really what we want out of this, is for people to feel connected to the actual plants.
That's what I'm excited to talk to you two about, because you strongly emphasize throughout the book to grow your own, sustainably harvest your own, as opposed to just going out and buying these dried herbs per se in the herb shop, which I'm sure there's, benefit to that as well. But I really love that your emphasis on connection to nature in the book. So before we continue, I'm going to do a little cover my ass, and it's I'm going to kind of read a portion of your note of caution. I won't read the whole thing because that might just take too long. So, dear listener, this book intends to educate but does not prescribe treatment for any ailments. Be self-aware, self-respectful, and conscious of all risks associated with these powerful plants. Consult with your practitioner before experimenting with herbs, especially if you are taking medication. Be sure to understand herb-drug interactions beforehand, and always be cautious in pregnancy or while breastfeeding. So again, I won't read the whole thing, but on page 14, you say, as mentioned in the cautionary note of the start of this book, the witching herbs are very strong psychotropics, potential poisons that can bring on strong hallucinations when taken in large doses. We do not work with them in this way, nor do we advocate others to do so. We work with them on a much more subtle levels, such as by growing these wonderful allies and adding them to our balms, using only relatively minute doses. We are much more interested in the energetics of these herbs and how we can use them to support and promote healthy lifestyles and relationships, both with our own kind and with the plant themselves. So now, after I just read all of that, do either of you have any feedback on, say, the words of caution or kind of what to expect from the book?
Like you just mentioned, the way that we want to promote people connecting is safely. We want people to have a good experience. And the way that we've had the most enriching experiences is by growing the plants. And we also understand that not everyone has access to land. So something that we've done with our social enterprise, the business that we run, is promote and support community growing projects. And something that we've seen again and again in a community garden, there's a lot of fear about planting herbs that are so-called poisons. So to navigate lots of different issues that can come up around that. But for people to actually bring the seeds, and even before that, where are you getting your seeds from? And we've tried really hard within our community to have seed sharing, and when people grow these plants, to be able to connect with others and say, I've got Datura seeds or Henbane seeds, and I've grown the plant here in this kind of aspect, and this kind of soil, so that we can really begin to understand where the plant generationally has come from. And then it starts with looking at the seeds, and we invite people to bring the seeds onto a space. We like to create altars where we can sit and look at the seeds, really observe them, and think about what and how we want to grow the plants even before we put the seed into the soil. Because if you're growing these plants, there is a responsibility to yourself, to other people around you, and to the plants, that you're beginning this relationship with care and respect. But it's just amazing to be able to grow your plants, all your herbs. It's a real privilege to see those first little germinating seed leaves and how a plant develops. And over time, beginning to understand, because these plants travel themselves, a lot of them, you put them in a garden and they can be in a south facing corner for years and then decide, no, I'm going to move and go somewhere a lot more shady, as they self-seed and germinate. And you can really see that these are conscious, sentient beings. They're not, the language that we've all been brought up with going to school in the UK in English is, we talk about a plant as it, and we talk about their uses. And that really kind of creates a divide, a separation, because of our words. And by growing them, I think you begin to break that down and actually have an embodied experience with the plants.
But also to say, these plants are used in clinical medicine as well. And, the Schedule 20 in the UK says that it's only practitioners that can prescribe these herbs. And by that, we take that to mean that it's someone that has experienced these plants and the dosages and where that edge is between the dose being too large. But in combination with other herbs, these herbs are used in asthma, in Parkinsonian tremors, in gut spasm, in pain relief, in sciatica. There's a vast array of applications for these plants within medicine. And we're really interested in reviving that within clinical practice for herbalists, as well as this deeper spiritual connection with the plants, that if you're not confident or trained in how to combine herbs and why you might and where they might be appropriate to use and where not, then this is the route in, is to connect. And even if you are using them medicinally, we always say we would never give a herb to anyone that isn't a plant that we've seen growing or that we can connect with in some way. Otherwise, you become disconnected from the medicine that you're giving out. So yeah, there's that caution for a person coming to this with fresh eyes, but there's also a an encouragement of herbalists to get educated and learn about the dosages, the strengths of the tinctures, the lengths of time the plants can be taken for, and in what situations they're appropriate or applicable in, and also the spiritual applications of them, because as clinical herbalists, we're not separate from taking people on a journey with a plant, with the spirit or the connection with the plant as well. So yeah, I think there's two different sides to that caution.
Totally. And you talked about the magic of growing the plant. And I've always been one of those herbalists that really didn't have a garden. You know, most of my herbalism took place in the old growth forests out in Western Cascades, Oregon. But Amanda has really spearheaded starting a garden in our new yard, which is, we have the privilege of having a yard, but it's also only zero point 0.1 acre. So it's been fun to watch her develop and plan and start growing these plants. And I got to tell you, the excitement of seeing that calendula pop up for the first time. Oh my goodness. It just, you get so giddy when you see the plants out there. And just every time you see it in the yard, you're just like, oh, this is so amazing. Like the magic of it all. So I totally vibe with that.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be a kick-ass hallucinogenic plant to give you that absolute buzz of a connection to have it growing, you know, or have them growing around you. And yeah, but you know, I will say, if you grow a Datura inside, for example, if you're ever sleeping near one of these plants growing, you do know about it in the dream space, because you know they are so powerfully potent with the aroma, and the, you know, the perfume that they put out is in itself really intoxicating. So yeah, just they're buddies that don't leave you alone at night.
So you're actually growing Datura inside. Is that available for most people?
So because we live in the UK and we get quite a cold, damp winter that can be frosty, Datura inoxia serves as a wonderful indoor plant, and we cultivate Datura inoxia and have done for many years inside.
That's rad.
You get a lot of in the States, you get a lot of Datura metal, slightly different species.
Okay.
Growing wild. I think they do the same as our stramonium here. So the stramonium that grows wild and outside in the UK just does its whole cycle in a year. And then the fresh plant, the new plant growth comes from the seeds, whereas the inoxia live on through the cycles, but they prefer a warmer climate. And the Datura metal, we get less of wild here, but I think you get more of that in the States.
Okay. Yeah, I have a feeling Amanda would be really into growing that indoor, and it's actually flowering too. When you're, wow. Okay.
Flowering with the moons. We've got them, and each full moon we get a new bloom.
That's amazing. So is Datura the one also called moonflower?
Yes.
Okay. Nice.
Or Jimson weed.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that one for sure.
Yeah.
Carlos Castaneda, I want to say, talked about that quite a bit in his books. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned growing, if you don't have a yard, growing in, like, say, a public garden. I just wanted to touch on that briefly because, I was thinking, would these things spread to other garden plots? Are people actually concerned about it? I guess it depends on where you're at in the world. But I just am picturing growing, you know, Datura and all these other power plants and how it'd be looked at by other folks. So I'm just curious if you could touch on that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because the kind of archetypal cottage garden is always painted or drawn, and you see the foxglove, the digitalis growing, and they're cultivated a lot in the UK, and they're just accepted. There's no kind of discussion, but people generally know that digitalis is a very potent plant. But when you introduce something like Datura into the discussions, there is a lot more fear and conversation around it, because Datura has historically been ripped up by the police in the UK for being a problematic plant. So having that kind of background historically means that people don't recognize the plant. It's not depicted in art as much, and it's very interesting because we've got a public garden very close to here. It's a beautiful old house and a famous site of a Victorian botanist. And in that public garden, which is open to everybody, they've got loads of belladonna just growing in amongst everything. They've got Datura popping up. And when we first visited there, we were just like, who's the head gardener here? Because, it's a space and you get little kids running around and there's no signs or anything like that. And it felt like a really good thing, because it puts responsibility back to us as individuals. And really, we don't want children or pets going and just nibbling all plants anyway. We want to have some kind of education for the wider society to be aware that there are certain plants, there always will be, and there always has been, certain things that you need caution around. And because we as humans need to have caution, why does that mean that these plants have to be banned from public spaces? So it's a very fine line, and it can be it's a huge conversation, but more than often it's about the individuals running the space. Because when we found the head gardener of Middleton House Gardens here in North London, he was just adamant that the plants had been grown there for a very, very long time, and it was up to the individuals coming to the gardens to educate themselves.
Your
I think
points.
it's back to that with the education, isn't it? Because it's times are changing, but certainly we live in a society where children aren't brought up with foraging as a normal part of their lives, certainly here in the UK. And the idea our children know if they pick something up, what's this? Can I eat it? It's not a dive straight in. I think if you're part of a foraging culture, then that becomes more of a norm to question things beforehand. But we're in a society where that's not a norm, which is why work like ours is very important, to get the messages out there, more information about how to forage carefully, how to bring children into it. But like Kazz said, there's yew trees growing all over the place that looks quite similar to pine to the untrained eye, that you could easily pull a bit off and start nibbling it. And, if you're little, find yourself in quite a bit of trouble. And so that education side of it is kind of the key. But we went to a garden, we were running a workshop on the flying ointment, which I'm sure we're going to get onto, in Switzerland, in Geneva. And right behind the artist studios that we were running the workshop in, there was a community garden behind it, quite a big space with local people working in it. And we went down and into the garden, and there was one bed that had pretty much every herb, not just the Solanaceae, but also the adjuncts that we use within that blend, in one bed within this garden. And I was just completely blown away, A, that it was in a community garden, B, that it had those plants in it, because there's such a lack of it here. And I couldn't find who'd planted them, or, and my language wasn't perfect to be communicating, so I ended up just saying, I love your garden. But it was just fascinating that there was children over the other side gardening with people, and there was no fence around it or warning signs. And I just thought, this is really interesting, that culturally or within that garden, maybe people are given an induction, or who knows, but that there's people aren't just going up and eating those plants there. There was henbane, there was datura, there was belladonna growing in that garden. So, yeah.
And you're right, we will get into the flying ointment. So the flying ointment contains all three: Henbane, Datura, belladonna. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Nice. Well, we'll wait a little bit to get into that, but first I want to brag for your book. You have a ton of endorsements at the very beginning, and I was just going to read a couple, if you don't mind. You mentioned Chanchel Cabrera, which I highly respect and love this herbalist, and she's got a really great endorsement at the beginning. So Chanchel writes, "This is a treasure of a book, full of gems and precious words of wisdom, delving deep into a dark subject and shining light on old practices and traditional knowledge. A textbook, a storybook, a book for clinicians and the curious lay reader alike. Engrossing and engaging, with beautiful photographs and illustrations throughout. Poison Prescriptions is a feast for the eyes as well as a source of important clinical information. I shall be referencing back to this book again and again." Also, quickly read Rosemary Gladstar. Also wrote a really lovely endorsement. "The Seed SistAs are at it again, spreading the good word of the herb, gathering our gracious green allies, and telling their stories so eloquently. I hope this new book travels far out into the world like a wild, tenacious seed." And I was actually just emailing with Rosemary the other day, and I mentioned I was going to be interviewing you two, and she's like, "Oh, I absolutely love the Seed SistAs and what they're doing." So, dear listener, please do pick up Poison Prescriptions. I'm going to forget the website, seedsistas.co.uk. Did I get it? Oh, wow. Awesome. Okay, cool. I should have had that written out already, but you don't need to comment on the endorsements if you don't want to, but I was blown away by who you got to write endorsements, as well as just a great little bit about the book right there. So why don't we go on and talk about kind of how the book is laid out. So the book is laid out in three parts from what I could tell. And I was maybe thinking we could go over like each of the sections, and I'll just kind of read out each section and we could talk a little bit about what lies within. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
Cool. So the three parts. The first part is the path of poisons. So what is in this section?
Are you going to test our brain memory?
Okay.
I thought you were going to carry on then, but I thought that was a rhetorical question.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Well, then how about this? How about I just...
it's fine.
Okay.
We can answer it.
Sure.
So the first part is really looking at magical practices with plants, how you can connect plants into your magical practice. And we're looking at some historical references and mainly at the way that we work with herbs in different ways, and also how you can prepare physically, mentally, and environmentally for doing ritual magic. It's kind of setting the scene for conscious awareness, especially when working with herbs that are as powerful as these.
And we have a look at a little bit of the lunar transits and how astrology also impacts some of our work. And because later on in the book, we've got a particular recipe that we suggest is worked through lunar cycles. And we also look at being a detective, because we often think of ourselves as clinical herbalists as being detectives, because we need these acute, keen observational skills when we're working with patients. But we apply those same observational skills to the plants. So we make suggestions to people about how they can begin to develop those skills for things like drawing and creating folklore and story for themselves about the plants.
I think we also talk in that section about hexing and sort of views on magic and approaches to magic, and a lot of those ideas around the fear that still resides in magic, and that you don't have to be confined by other people's prescriptions of magic, and if your candle's not blue, it's all right. Or if you if facing east doesn't seem right and you want to face west, then go for it. You know, just that you can bring your own imagination into magical practice, and that it can be an expression of creativity. But that there are some helpful practices that help to contain and focus magical practice around focused intention, setting the scene. You know, the stages of it, rather than being extremely prescriptive. Although we do also offer rituals and practices that you can do, because sometimes when you're new to practices, having guidelines and a structure is really helpful, that you can work through and get to an end point. And once you've learned other ways of practicing, you can then smash that apart a bit and bring your own flair to them. So we do offer practices within it as well, suggestions.
Just reminds me a lot of like cooking, you know, you got to start somewhere. So you got to follow the recipe, but eventually you develop your own style. I love that. And I love that that's the Seed Sistas approach. I've heard you talk a lot about how you have like, say, a punk background, a DIY background, and you kind of just do your own thing, whatever the intuition is telling you to do. And I really admire that. But yeah, you got to start somewhere. So if a lot of the stuff is new to you, like you said, there's a lot of recipes, so to speak, in the book to get you started. So the second section, to test your memory again, is connecting to the witching herbs. What's that all about?
That's where we begin to introduce this family, the nightshade or Solanaceae family, and have a look at a bit more of their phytochemical constituents, and especially the alkaloids, and how these specific alkaloids interact with our neurology and nervous system. We get a bit geeky with some information there that chemists might enjoy and clinicians might enjoy. And then we delve a lot deeper into the individual plants. So we have almost like, you know, mini chapters on each of the Datura, Henbane, and the belladonna.
It's like an ode to each one of those plants, looking at their history worldwide, our experiences with them, like the sensory herbal approach, homeopathy, how they're worked with in clinical herbalism, how they've been used actually in pharmaceutical medicine historically as well. So each one has all of those sections within it, so that, you know, it's trying to give this really broad, clear picture of each herb. And then lots of beautiful artwork that's being created by Silva, who is a fabulous friend and artist who actually created a lot of the inks from the plants and worked with them very magically to create the artwork as well. And yeah, it's a real, that section's like the real love of the herbs oozing through it, hopefully.
Within that section, we've also included information about what to do if you do accidentally overdose. So we talk about dosages, and we've mentioned that before, and, you know, everything is a poison dependent on the dose. So understanding the way the tinctures are created, and then how much of the tinctures are kind of the standard acceptable dose. And if you did take too much of that, what you could do to alleviate some of the symptoms while you got yourself off to get proper treatment. Because, you know, that's a really important part as well. And it's something that we learned experientially for ourselves, because I actually poisoned myself while I was at university with black cohosh, which is a herb that I've never gone near since. I took, I was at work, working in a dispensary, and took a whacking dose of simicifuga. And on the drive home, my vision just shut down, and I phoned. I was like, I've poisoned myself. You need to heal me. And through that protocol, you know, by working with bentonite clay to chelate, working with various different green juices, reflexology points. Experientially, we learn about ways that you can self-manage a poisoning before you got other treatment.
Or before it becomes really damaging as well. I mean, the thing with black cohosh was that, that was like a physical poisoning for Kazz. And it did, you did come around pretty quick, relatively, from it. But with the Solanaceae, and we talk about it in there, as well as some of the physical symptoms that can happen when you take too much, like a frighteningly dry mouth that you can't quench your thirst, and hot skin, feeling really dry, the heart racing, but the muscles can be quite relaxed. In a severe kind of delirium state, you can have hallucination. This is why we don't refer to these plants as psychedelics. You can experience hallucinations, but unlike things like, classic psychedelic drugs like LSD or magic mushrooms or something like that, you're experiencing an altered state of consciousness, but you're not necessarily aware that you're experiencing it. It's like you're in it and it's reality. And that's part of the reason why we believe there's so much mythology connected with these plants, because it's like they're revealing innate parts of like ourselves, or our kind of, almost archetypal ancestral stuff that was going on there, because it's real in that moment, rather than here's something I'm experiencing that I know will come round from. And that can be a very frightening place for people. So that's the caution with why we don't refer to them as psychedelics. And it takes a lot, and you're more than likely to have this like unquenchable thirst, etc., before you get into that real state. That's often seen in intoxications where people have smoked loads or eaten loads and have managed a vast dose of it. But it doesn't take a lot to have wildly vivid feelings and experiences with them. And we'll talk next about the next chapter, but that's why we work with these in very specific ways when we're talking about connection and altering perception.
You mentioned smoking herbs, and another solanaceous plant is tobacco. I want to say on page 76, you talk a little bit about the usage of tobacco, which I believe falls into part 2 of the book. Can you briefly touch on how tobacco is used? And I don't know, kind of talk about tobacco, and I guess in the terms of like the magical uses of plants that you're talking about throughout the book.
Tobacco, before you come in there, Kazz, tobacco is actually one that's in gardens all over. Loads of people have tobacco plants growing in their gardens, and they don't even realize that they've got tobacco plants growing. So that's another. Yeah.
They're beautiful foliage and these lovely pale flowers. So you see them a lot in gardens as ornamentals. But yes, tobacco is such an interesting plant, because many of us were introduced to tobacco as teenagers because it was really cool to smoke, because you looked up and you got a little hit. And it was very normal when I was growing up that 14-year-olds all crowded around the local tobacconist and we'd be smoking. I personally was into Marlboro because I loved the adverts of the American cowboy. It was only later when I started mixing with people who were really into Native American culture. So here in the UK in the 90s, there was a huge kind of movement of people who wanted to live like Native American tribes. So they lived in teepees. They still do. There's an area in Wales, which is one of the wettest places in the UK where people live. And at that time, there was, there's a lot of appropriation that went on before the word appropriation was in the lexicon. But I sat round fires where people were talking about grandfather tobacco. And I was always, curious and saying, what's that about? So digging into a bit of the history and reading about peace pipes, and my understanding, because I've never experienced any traditional ritual with people of the land where it comes from, but my understanding is that tobacco is a gateway, is an opener. That's my experience of tobacco. So when I've smoked tobacco, I've felt an excitement in my tissues, because I'm not addicted to tobacco. So if I have a smoke, I can feel this rush and opening and lots of energy going to my head. And when we've looked at mugwort, Artemisia vulgaris, Artemisia was what was smoked here in Europe before nicotinum arrived on these lands. And mugwort is also very much an opener and a gateway exploration herb. So we felt that they've got a lot of similarities. There's a lot of things that feel like these herbs have got some kind of connection. But we don't smoke tobacco. We don't bring tobacco into any of our ritual work, but we do bring mugwort in, because we cultivate and have mugwort growing all around us. And we enjoy mixing mugwort with other herbs to smoke as well. And it was our mentor, actually, it was Christopher Headley, that first talked about smoking herbs as medicine. He was saying that at one stage he was working with mental health patients in a hospital setting, and when people were really, really agitated, he'd give them a few lavender flowers to mix into their tobacco roll-ups. And it was interesting to think about herbs actually used clinically to affect different shifts, because coltsfoot, of course, is another famous smoking herb, but I find it quite disgusting, and I've never prescribed coltsfoot for people to smoke, because we like to experiment and work with the herbs ourselves. We ended up developing a blend which was mugwort, elderflower, marshmallow leaf, and peppermint leaf, and in equal quantities. That became our absolute favourite blend. I mean, lovely to smoke, because we really enjoy smoking pipes. And the way that we have our smoking rituals is we open harvesting. So before we go to connect and harvest the plant, we smoke a pipe, often in groups with other people or just by ourselves, to represent this moment in time where we are shifting just very gently our consciousness to be able to be aware of what we're doing with the plant, to be able to commune in some way, to let the plants know we've come to harvest them, we're asking if it's okay to harvest them, and really feel a bit more sensitive.
We went
like that
to
ritual.
Yeah, we went to we've done a lot of work around mugwort because she's a plant we work with so much, and the Anglo-Saxon text, the Lacnunga, calls her Una the first. And it's just quite interesting with that idea of the opening and the gateway in. And as teenagers, I don't know if your teens in the States do this, but you used to like scrape banana skins and use dried oregano, and it's something that is within teens to want to smoke and experiment. And mugwort has no tar, well, less tar than tobacco, no nicotine, is completely non-addictive, but has this gentle connection with that kind of pineal gland, melatonin, kind of wake sleep cycle, putting you into this gentle waking dream state. And once you find her growing on the waysides, it's really the traveler's herb, lining the wayside, and so abundant. And even to be able to point teens in that, of a certain age or whatever, as they're getting interested in that, to something that they can actually connect with in a different way that's much less harmful, is, it's an interesting idea of how to support our teens with exploration rather than sending them out into a world where what's available is quite destructive and harmful for them. And yeah, we love the stories of the namesake Artemisia, Artemis connected with the mugwort and that protector of small children, and the huntress in the forest, but also the one that if the hunters are taking too much, will go and have a word with them and take them out if they're affecting the balance within the forest. And that it's this real kind of balance of nature. And just there's so much special power within mugwort that you're connecting with all of that when you bring her into ceremonies.
I'm very fond of mugwort. I actually grew it in my yard in Oregon. And when we sold our house, we grew all these weedy herbs and we like mowed everything down. And I'm just like picturing the next owners inheriting this like giant stand of mugwort, which I absolutely love. But I dream a lot every night. I have for as long as I can remember. I could see how smoking mugwort would produce this like wonderful dreamlike waking state during the day. I'm honestly concerned about using it for myself for dreaming because I already do it so much. But I want to say Howie Brownstein was talking about, maybe it was mugwort or maybe it was a different dream herb, about how it kind of takes you to the next level of a dream state, which I guess does appeal to me. But part of me wants to just have a night where I just am zonked out and don't have any dreams, because I wonder if it'd be more resting. But I don't know if you have any follow-up thoughts on that. But yeah, absolutely adore mugwort.
I was just thinking, like, when you crave a night without dreams, sometimes I find that's skullcap for me. When I take skullcap, I imagine I put on one of the leather skullcaps and it just keeps everything quiet. So,
Oh, that's great. That's a great analogy. Okay. Maybe I should try skullcap.
see how it dreams with you.
Totally.
We often say that the mugwort helps you to connect with your dreams more, so to kind of understand the messaging and the patterning within them. But there is, we've both experienced it over longer periods of doing a lot of dream work, that kind of dream state, physical reality starts to blur a bit, and that you get in a state where sometimes you don't know if you've dreamt something or if it was in this physical reality. Not to say that the dream state is not real, but that we do have to exist in this physical reality as well. And sometimes if you're blurring that a lot, it can become, the realities get enmeshed. So we tend to dream for certain periods of time with specific reasons for dreaming, or questions to be answered, or problem solving, or to connect in a certain way, or for healing, or whatever it might be. Yeah
In your book you mentioned a Christopher Headley quote where if you're dealing with a problem, he said you should dream on it. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Set your intention.
Yeah, very
Awesome.
much.
Well, the third segment is the flying ointment, which I want to say is kind of like the recipe section. But why don't you tell us what's in the flying ointment section of the book?
The flying ointment is, again, actually, we'd already been working with these plants, but we were introduced to the concept of the flying ointment by Christopher Headley, who rubbed belladonna flying ointment on our pulse points, a herbalist gathering in the Midlands of England. as the full moon was rising and the mist was gathering over the fields, and the tent had a Scottish ceilidh band blasting out ceilidh music, and he rubbed the belladonna ointment and swang us, and we swang each other like dervishing kind of spirals, and we entered into this complete altered state. And it was a whole weekend of working with the energetics of herbs and really getting to understand and know herbs. It was very formative in a lot of our peers at that time, development of our practices. And it was at that time he spoke about herbalism being a broad church, that there's so many different ways to practice with herbs. And we started to explore recipes and ideas and the history of what the flying ointment was. And the kind of myth or the story around the flying ointment is that it's this preparation made from a green oil, because a lot of the alkaloids that are in those Solanaceae plants create like a rich green oil. We often make a hot oil infusion with them. And that green oil is turned into this unguent that is a wonderful sciatic treatment for externally for pain, for toothache, but also when applied to the mucous membranes of the vagina, the nostrils, up your bum, creates this, it misses going into the bloodstream as the same way as if you take it orally. It goes straight into the bloodstream and misses out going through the liver. So you get the alkaloids straight into your bloodstream and this instantaneous connection to the plants that are contained within them. And not only that, but astonishingly, within what seems like quite a simple principle, you have things like the alkaloids that are found in the plants are alkaline in nature, and alkaline substances pass over the mucous membranes more readily and more easily. So you need even less doses of them to initiate the responses. And the sense and the connection with those herbs creates this sense of flight, which has been associated with the witches flying on their broomsticks to the sabbats, to celebrations, to reach these altered states and have these celebratory parties around a fire and possibly a big vat of flying ointment. And we just loved those stories and started to experiment and play and create and work with the ointment ourselves. And, just imagined ourselves on this 20-year flight of a broomstick that we've been on 25 years, flying through time and with these plants. And, here we are today talking about it to you.
So
Yeah,
cool.
we set about having an annual community gathering where we would co-create the ointment with whoever came. And we did that around Samhain. We did that in the winter times. And year on year, our recipes developed because we were traveling a lot. We've got a caravan and vans, and we travel around different music festivals and green fairs. And so as we traveled the country, we'd find patches of belladonna, or one year we found swathes of foxglove and we introduced foxglove into the balm. And every year the recipe would slightly shift and change. And we kind of got into feeling what felt safe, what felt good. For example, the foxglove was far too strong, and we've discontinued foxglove in the balm. And we've never ever put hemlock in the balm, although we've been around a lot of hemlock and we've come close and started feeling the energetics and feeling the plant. It's always been like a big step back and no. But over these 20 years and working with lots and lots of different people, and then finally meeting And Mary, an old woman in Cornwall who gave us an old recipe of one of her ancestors, we developed what we have written about in the book, this particular recipe. And there's other herbs in that balm as well. There's herbs like St. John's wort, there's herbs like yarrow and rose, and marshmallow, herbs to help support softening, to support the nervous system, to support the digestion, so that even though we are taking very small doses, we're still thinking about protection. We always work with milk thistle before we take the balm. We always think about how we can support our own livers and everybody's livers around us before you're taking something that's going to put a bit of extra stress on all of your organs of elimination, just like having a cup of strong coffee does. But
Right.
it's a conscious awareness of working to introduce this level of consciousness to communities. And as we sit in circle with all of the people every year, and they bring the herbs into the oil and we stir it into the cauldron, we ask them to bring their own words and their own intentions. And it's always around responsibility and community. Because the biggest thing that we feel is part of our responsibility as humans, part of our duty, is to create a different paradigm. And that's huge. It sounds really big, but working magically, we can begin to vision a utopian society. And just visioning that without kind of real thought and process is a bit flippant. So we're really feeling into what does it mean? And there's all these buzzwords like community, it's a big buzzword, but what does it actually mean to us as individuals? What do we want from a community? What can we bring to a community? What is our part in co-creating that? And over the years, it's become more and more nuanced. This year was just mind-blowing because we had quite a few people who were deep cats. We had some psychotherapists on the course who brought a whole extra kind of load of words and thought to it.
It was a longer event this year, though. It was a weekend retreat exploring deeply the energetics of each herb and it was like an elongated process. Often we do it over a long day, but it was really beautiful to be able to dive more deeply with people that came along and work in that way. And as a result, and with the people that were on it this year, this idea of community got really the realities of community and the messiness of community with people and individuals and people that carry their traumas with them into community and how that impacts on the group and actually what these herbs are, as we've talked about, is they have this chaotic edge to them. And you can try and have an ideal of community or an ideal of a journey with one of these herbs, but you also have to be prepared that it's going to take potentially a lot of strength and will to face certain aspects of society or yourself or community. And it's really interesting this year what's come out of the balm creation and how that's going to affect this next batch, really.
So this is an event you're going to do every year, or that you already do every year?
Really.
Okay.
Yearly event here in the UK in a usually in some sort of special castle or stately home somewhere.
Do you mind if I list that on the international events page on HerbRally?
Oh, please do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll definitely do that. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Do you have any closing thoughts about the book, or anything else you're working on that you'd like to share with the audience?
We've been working on creating an online membership, which is actually our coven, our coven of herbal secrets, because we realize that what people really benefit from when they're getting interested in plants or magic is knowing that other people are there to support you and that you're not a total weirdo, and there's a vast supportive community of plant lovers out there, like the good work that you're doing as well, connecting people together. And yeah, so we've created this beautiful online space of lots of different portals of different areas with like a huge backlog of learning in there, but also community groups and live sessions and events. So that'd be really lovely. Or we've got our newsletters, our weekly newsletters as well. We give out loads of free info and seasonal stuff, as well as more general information on those. So lots of ways to come and get in touch and say hello with us.
And another project that we've been involved in is actually personifying the herbs. And it was something that we got involved with as part of a COP26 project. So when COP26 was in Glasgow, one of our students was undertaking a pilgrimage, walking all the way up the spine of Albion to Glasgow in Scotland from the Isle of Wight. And as part of that pilgrimage, we were commissioned to make a series of films called Voices from the Hedgerow, where we donned amazing costumes made by another friend and took on the personas of the plants. And these were aimed at families who were just getting out, it was lockdown times, and showing them some of their really familiar plants like blackberry or apple. And we had such good fun and we got such brilliant feedback that we ended up taking fruity climate comedy on the road, dressed as apple and damson. And it's something that we are really keen to develop further, because we want to get the message out to people who have never thought that herbs are medicine. Because it's lovely talking to people who are interested and already have some knowledge of the plants. But we're very interested in talking to people who've never, ever thought that the plants that they walk past daily could have interactions with them or could become their friends. And this feels like a really accessible, silly, fun way to get the education out there.
I know you have videos like that on your YouTube channel. Are these new videos that are going to be released here soon, or is that what you're referring to?
These are live events, so they're not recorded.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, they're live.
Okay.
At the festivals and at conferences.
That's awesome.
We actually had our coming out as Datura and Chile last year at a festival, and we headlined Saturday night at a festival, and just before we went on, we were just thought, okay, this is ridiculous and brilliant. Let's just go. and then
awesome.
Yeah, we won an award at that festival for being the second best speakers at the festival. We're like, we'll call ourselves top 3 instead of second.
Yeah,
because
that's hilarious. Yeah, exactly.
But
first loser.
It was really, really fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, learn more about all the events, the book, everything at seedsistas.co.uk. One more time for your viewing pleasure right there for the YouTube audience. Yeah, beautiful book. Well, you two, it's been a lot of fun to catch up. Let's have you back on for a third time at some point. That'd be awesome. And thanks so much for joining us on the Herbalist Hour.
Our pleasure.
Lovely talking to you.
You as well, as always. Well, we'll see you in the next episode, y'all. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
And that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the HerbRally podcast. If you'd like to hear more from us here at HerbRally, we now have a text message community, believe it or not. Basically, it's just updates from us. We send about 1 to 7 texts per week, notifying you about new events, videos, courses, podcasts. You get the idea. It's pretty much like our email newsletter, just in text form. So if you'd like to receive text messages from HerbRally, just text JOIN, that's JOIN, to the number 541-256-2895. Again, that's join to number 541-256-2895. And to stop receiving texts, that's easy too. Just text STOP to the same number. It'll opt you out immediately. Okay, thanks again for listening. Have a great rest of your day.